Now, as we've been hearing this week, one of the major issues facing sports events, teams and leagues around the world is understanding the extent to which fans will want to return to mass gatherings as and when they're allowed to do so.
Indeed, and Nielsen Sports, who we are delighted to again welcome as a main partner for another Leaders event, have, as you would expect, been doing their bit to find out exactly that. So let's get a sense of the fan landscape at the moment by speaking to Jon Stainer, Managing Director of Nielsen Sports Americas. Jon, good morning.
Morning, David. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Very good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
You shared earlier in the week a couple of data points that you've been working on over at Nielsen Sports, and I just wanted to kick off with one to sort of set the scene. And you're looking at the US market, of course. Over the next 12 months, across the 5 major professional sports leagues in the US, an average of 13% of the general population plan on attending a live sports game in person, assuming those sports return in 2020. 13%. 25% will likely refrain from attending any live events for the foreseeable future. So a couple of really interesting data points for us to dig into over the next few minutes. Maybe as a starting point, if you can just put a bit of meat on the bones of those for us.
Yeah, absolutely, David. Thank you. Look, we've been tracking consumer sentiment and opinion to returning to live games and live sports and entertainment events ever since COVID-19 broke. And the 13% represents the adult population here in the US. So when you put that into absolute numbers, that's a pretty significant number of people still. That's close to 30 million people, adults in the US. But you kind of need to put this into more context around, how comfortable they feel about going to events. Yeah, the stat that you talked about is them planning to go to events, but what are their comfort levels around that? And look, our recent analysis shows that over 50% of adults feel comfortable return to live sporting and entertainment events in the next 6 months, which I think is really, really encouraging. But that spikes as well amongst sports fans, which is up at more around like 2/3 of sports fans would say they'll come back to live events. And then interestingly, amongst a younger demographic, the sort of like 18 to 34 demographic, you're up about 3/4 of them saying that in the next 6 months, they'll be back, they'll be in stadiums, they'll be in the bleachers, and they'll be attending live sports and entertainment events.
Indeed, so it's looking quite optimistic. At the same time, you've got almost a pent-up interest rising in all of these sports. It's worth saying that the leagues you were looking at, NHL, NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer in particular, but interest levels during this pause in live sport stronger than ever.
Absolutely. Look, this weekend we saw NASCAR return to our television screens here in the US. 6.3 million viewers tuned into that live broadcast from Darlington. It was the highest rated broadcast outside of Daytona in the last 3 years, and about 3 times the average of their normal live viewership. So, that pent-up interest is really starting to show in viewership numbers with broadcasts coming back. I think, look, one of the key things that we need to think about in terms of live event attendance is that consumers are going to take advice first and foremost from their local governments in terms of getting back into public spaces, getting back to live events, getting back to experiential activities and things. And I think that's really important for sports leagues, for sports teams and sports brands to understand, because everyone has their own timeline around COVID-19 and a return to their comfort levels in getting back to live events. And that's really important, I think, in terms of how sports markets and promotes to each of those. There's obviously concerns around safety, and people will need to take the appropriate measures to doing that, and limiting contact and thinking about the use of technology in limiting contact, but also providing an immersive experience through technology. But every single age profile, every single demographic is going to be different in terms of their comfort levels in returning, and also the type of safety measures that they want to see. And I think we're also seeing that sports brands, sports leagues, sports teams, they need to continue to conduct themselves appropriately around COVID-19, because this is both an attraction but also a deterrent for sports fans in terms of their engagement with the events and with the sports themselves.
Now, obviously at Nielsen Sports around the world, but in your region as well, you're working with a host of clients in a host of different sports. During this pause in live events, what have you seen that's impressed you, that stood out to you in terms of digital fan engagements?
Yeah, look, if I talk about a bit of fun and relevancy,
we love fun. We love fun here.
We love fun, absolutely. So we've obviously had the NFL draft here recently. We've had the announcement of the 2020 schedule, and we've all been experiencing like home working and homeschooling and things. So what I really loved actually is what the Carolina Panthers did around their announcing of the 2020 NFL schedule. This was done to the soundtrack of Sunday Best. So those TikTokers out there will be really familiar with that. And the campaign really centered around like a day in the life under quarantine, and some really unique ways in which they kind of announced their 17-week schedule through, the week-by-week games appearing in bowls of cereals. There were plays on the Tiger King, Guy Fieri of Diners, Drive-Ins and Dives fame was also involved in it. Look, and it had some great impact as well. I think over 650,000 Twitter viewers, close to 15,000 interactions. I just thought it was a really good play on the current situation that we're in, but a really great way of engaging people. So I think big kudos to Tom Glick and the team down in Charlotte on that one. I really enjoyed that. I think from a brand's perspective, I really like the way that the big corporates have actually pivoted on their sort of traditional sponsorship campaigns, especially around some of their marquee partnerships, and they pivoted it to more purpose-based community and local initiatives. So two that are top of mind are visas, businesses your first pick. So a play on the draft, nicely timed around the NFL draft here, really nicely executed in terms of promoting a message around supporting local businesses and supporting your local community. And then I think Toyota, as big Olympic Games partner, sort of pivoted on their Tokyo 2020 campaign with a celebration of the heroes and on the front line at the moment, and the medal ceremony around your Start Your Impossible campaign, which I thought was really neat in terms of celebrating today's heroes rather than the athletes of tomorrow when they eventually compete in Tokyo in 2021. So I thought that those were some neat ones. And then I think the other one that I just want to call out, which I think is so relevant for us as a sports industry, is the Travis Scott and Fortnite astronomical campaign and concert. And really, for me, that's where the sports industry needs to be. That's the opportunity for the sports industry, right now. And that initial concert had an average minute audience of about 4.5 million viewers. About half of that were coming from live viewing. Look, and there's some nice coverage there for Nike as well in the content. So think about the opportunity of doing this with NFL and Madden and Twitch. And, this is a space where I think the sports industry needs to take the opportunity whilst we've got this downtime and think about where we're going to be playing.
Just got 30 seconds or so left, Jon, with you, short and sweet. But wanted to ask you about what your plans are at Nielsen in terms of ongoing fan research. Obviously, everybody is keen to know about attitudes, opinions, fan sentiment at this time, perhaps more than ever. What are your plans in terms of rolling out more research on COVID and the return of live sport?
Yeah, look, so we'll continue tracking and monitoring, consumer attitudes and sentiments towards COVID-19, getting back to some sort of normality. But for us, it is really getting a forensic focus around consumer time and share of wallet as we come into a new normal or a next normal. At the end of the day, all of our businesses start with the consumer. So having a forensic understanding of that and helping people understand then the value of partnerships and how they engage and promote and market to consumers is pivotal for us as a business. And look, I'm delighted that we're helping a whole load of leagues, rights holders and brands just try and understand the value equation right now in terms of sponsorship contracts and media rights contracts. So there's a lot going on in our world, and excited about what's to come for the industry and for our business.
Superb. Well, thank you as ever for your time, Jon. You have won the competition for the best placed cushions so far this week. So we'll see how we go today and tomorrow. Always good to talk to you, Jon. Thanks for joining us.